The chandelier above cast 1,000 shards of light across the grand ballroom of the Fairmont Hotel, each crystal catching the golden glow and scattering it like stars on the polished marble floor. Laughter rose in waves, mingling with the clink of crystal flutes and the soft hum of a jazz quartet tucked in the corner. Charlotte Martin née Mitchell stood at the edge of the crowd, her crimson silk gown, clinging to her curves, the fabric a bold contrast to the muted elegance of the room. Her husband, Charles Martin, stood a few steps away, his tailored suit sharp as a blade, his gray eyes scanning the room with the precision of a predator. Tonight he was honored as Entrepreneur of the Year, a title that cemented his place as San Francisco's untouchable titan of artificial intelligence. Yet despite the warmth of his hand brushing hers earlier, Charlotte felt a chill she couldn't name. The air was thick with Wealth Rose's champagne velvet dresses and diamond cufflinks. Guests moved like chess pieces, their smiles calculated, their words weighted with intent. Charlotte had grown accustomed to these events in the year since her wedding, but tonight felt different. Eyes lingered on her too long whispers, trailing in her wake like smoke. She caught fragments. Martin's empire is unshakable now, and who would have thought she'd rise so far? But they only deepened her unease. She smoothed her dress, her fingers grazing the delicate stitching she'd crafted herself, a reminder of the life she'd built before Charles, before this world of power and secrets. A waiter approached his movements so smooth he seemed to glide. "For you, Mrs. Martin," he murmured, extending a silver tray. On it lay an unaddressed black envelope, its wax seal imprinted with a crescent moon eclipsing a sun. Charlotte's breath caught. She glanced at Charles, who was deep in conversation with a silver-haired venture capitalist. His posture relaxed, but his eyes sharp. She slipped the envelope into her clutch, her heart thudding against her ribs. The waiter vanished into the crowd before she could ask who sent it. She stepped toward a shadowed alcove, her heels clicking softly on the marble. The envelope felt heavy in her hands, as if it carried more than paper. Breaking the seal, she pulled out a single sheet, the words scrawled in elegant slanted ink. "Ask your husband about Project Eclipse. It will devour you both." Her pulse spiked. Project Eclipse. The name was unfamiliar, a ghost from a past Charles rarely spoke of. She folded the note, her fingers trembling, and tucked it back into her clutch. Her eyes darted to Charles, who now laughed lightly, with a senator his charm effortless. But something in his posture, a slight tension in his jaw, told her he'd noticed her absence. Before she could return to him, the lights flickered. A collective gasp rippled through the room. The chandeliers went dark, plunging the ballroom into shadow for a heartbeat. A woman screamed. Charlotte's hand tightened on her clutch, her body tensing as if bracing for a blow. When the lights snapped back on, chaos erupted. A man, a stocky investor named Harold Grayson, whose name Charlotte vaguely recalled from Charles's board meetings, lay crumpled on the floor, blood pooling beneath his pinstriped suit. A knife glinted beside him, its blade stained crimson. Guests stumbled back, their faces pale, their voices rising in panic. Charlotte froze, her eyes locked on the body. The crowd parted, and she saw Charles striding toward her, his expression unreadable, but his steps deliberate. Before he reached her, a figure brushed past a woman in a silver gown, her face half hidden by a cascade of dark hair. She leaned close, her breath cold against Charlotte's ear. "Eclipse is coming," she whispered, her voice sharp as a blade. Then she was gone, swallowed by the crowd. Charles reached her, gripping her arm with a steadiness that grounded her. "Stay close," he said, his voice low, his gray eyes scanning the room. Security swarmed the scene, barking orders. while guests whispered furiously. Charlotte's mind raced. The note, the murder, the whisper. They were connected, she was sure of it. But to what and why her? As paramedics rushed in, Charles guided her toward a side exit, his grip firm but not harsh. "We're leaving," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. The city lights streaked past like comets in the Bentley outside, but Charlotte barely noticed. She pulled the note from her clutch, her voice steady despite the storm in her chest. "What is Project Eclipse, Charles?" His hands tightened on the steering wheel, his knuckles whitening. He didn't answer for a moment, his eyes fixed on the road. "Where did you hear that name?" he asked finally, his voice dangerously quiet. She held up the note, her fingers steady, despite the tremor in her heart. "This was delivered to me tonight, right before Grayson was killed." Charles's jaw clenched, his eyes flicking to the paper. He pulled the car into a shadowed alley, cutting the engine. The silence was deafening. He took the note, his gaze darkening as he read it. "This is a warning," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. "Someone's playing a dangerous game." "Who?" Charlotte pressed her voice sharp. "And why me?" He turned to her, his gray eyes stormy, but unguarded for the first time that night. "Because you're my weakness," he said softly, "and they know it." The weight of his words settled over her, both a confession and a cage. She wanted to ask more, to demand the truth, but the memory of the whisper eclipse is coming chilled her. Whoever was behind this knew more than they should, and they weren't afraid to kill. As the Bentley returned to life, Charlotte's mind spun with questions. Who was the woman in silver? What was Project Eclipse? And why did she feel like the ground beneath her was about to crack open? One thing was sure, the life she'd fought for, the love she'd found was under threat, and she wasn't about to let it slip away without a fight. If you're as gripped by this mystery, hit that like button, comment with your theories, and subscribe to follow Charlotte and Charles's story. The shadows are only getting darker, and you won't want to miss what's next. The penthouse was a fortress of glass and steel, its floor-to-ceiling windows framing San Francisco's glittering skyline. Charlotte stood in the living room, the city's lights casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. The black envelope from the gala sat on the coffee table. Its wax seal was broken, but its threat was intact. She hadn't slept, and the words "Project Eclipse" would devour you both, looping in her mind like a warning bell. Charles had promised answers, but his silence since they'd returned home felt heavier than any explanation could. She glanced at the clock, 2 a.m. Charles was in his study, the door ajar, a sliver of light spilling into the hall. She could hear the faint clack of his keyboard, the occasional rustle of papers. He'd told her to rest, but rest was impossible when every instinct screamed something was wrong. The murder at the gala, the whispered warning, the note, they weren't random. They were puzzle pieces, and Charlotte was determined to fit them together. She slipped into their bedroom, her bare feet silent on the cool floor. Her target was Charles's safe, hidden behind a false panel in the closet. He'd shown her the combination once, a gesture of trust after Victor Cross's betrayal. Her fingers trembled as she punched the code, the lock clicking open with a soft thud. Inside, among contracts and a velvet box holding her wedding ring, was a sleek USB drive, unmarked but heavy with promise. She hesitated, her breath catching. This was a line she couldn't uncross, but the image of Harold Grayson's blood pooling on the marble floor pushed her forward. Back in the living room, she plugged the USB into her laptop. The screen flickered, then filled with encrypted files labeled Eclipse. Her heart pounded as she clicked one, expecting resistance, but it opened instantly. A video began to play, grainy at first, then sharpening into focus. A woman stood in a dimly lit room, her face eerily familiar, almond eyes, high cheekbones, a mirror of Charlotte's own. But her hair was jet black, her expression cold and calculating, nothing like the warmth Charlotte saw in her reflection. The woman leaned toward a group of shadowed figures, her voice low and commanding. "Charles thinks he's untouchable, but Eclipse will be our final move. We take the code. We take his empire." Charlotte's breath hitched. The woman looked and moved like her, but wasn't her. The video cut off abruptly, leaving her staring at a blank screen. Footsteps echoed behind her. She spun her laptop, snapping shut as Charles stood in the doorway, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar, his gray eyes stormy. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice low-edged with something that wasn't quite anger, but close. She stood, her chin lifting despite the tremor in her hands. "Who is she, Charles?" "The woman in the video. She looks like me." His jaw tightened, his gaze flicking to the laptop. He crossed the room in 3 strides, his hand reaching for it, but she stepped before him. "No more secrets," she said, her voice steady. "You said I was your weakness. Then trust me with the truth." He exhaled sharply, his hand dropping. "Her name is Elise," he said, finally, his voice rough. She was a partner in the early days of Martin Technologies. Brilliant, ruthless, and dangerous. She wanted to weaponize Project Eclipse and turn it into something I couldn't allow. I cut her out, and she vanished. Or so I thought. Charlotte's mind raced. Why does she look like me? Charles's eyes softened, but only for a moment. She doesn't. Not really. It's a trick, a manipulation. She's obsessed with control, with winning. If she's back, it's not just about me, it's about you. The weight of his words settled over her, cold and heavy. She wanted to believe him, to trust the man who'd risked everything to save her from Victor Cross. But the video, the note, the murder, they were threads in a web she couldn't yet see. "What is Project Eclipse?" she pressed. "And don't tell me it's just another AI project." He turned away, his shoulders tense, his gaze fixed on the city beyond the windows. "It was meant to be a shield," he said quietly, "a system to detect and neutralize cyber threats before they could strike banks, governments, infrastructure. But in the wrong hands, it could weaken economies, manipulate markets. Elise saw that power and wanted it. I shut it down before she could take it. Then why is it back?" Charlotte's voice rose sharp with frustration. "Why is someone killing for it?" He turned to her, his eyes burning. "Because I wasn't thorough enough. I thought she was gone, but clearly I was wrong." The silence between them crackled electric and taut. Charlotte's mind spun with questions, but her phone buzzed on the table before she could ask another. A text from an unknown number. "Check your mirror, Charlotte. She's closer than you think." Her blood ran cold. She crossed to the hallway mirror, her reflection pale under the dim light. For a moment she swore she saw a flicker, her own face, but with darker hair, colder eyes. She blinked, and it was gone. Behind her, Charles's hand rested on her shoulder, warm and steady, but it did little to quell the dread pooling in her chest. "I need to know everything," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "No more half-truths." He nodded, his grip tightening. "Tomorrow, I promise. But tonight, we stay vigilant." As they stood together, the city glittering below, Charlotte felt the weight of something far larger than herself, a shadow moving closer. This secret could unravel everything they'd fought for. Elise, whoever she was, wasn't just a ghost from Charles's past. She was a mirror, a threat, a promise of chaos. And Charlotte knew with chilling certainty that the game had just begun. The fog clung to San Francisco's streets like a shroud muffling the hum of the city as Charlotte stepped into the narrow alley behind a Mission District cafe. Her scarf was pulled tight against the morning chill, her boots clicking softly on the damp pavement. The text from the unknown number still burned in her mind. "Check your mirror, Charlotte. She's closer than you think." She hadn't told Charles about it, not yet. His promise of answers last night had been sincere, but his hesitation, the way his eyes darted away when she pressed about Elise, told her he was holding something back. She needed someone else who could see through the shadows Charles cast. Lena Voss was waiting at a corner table inside the cafe, her auburn hair pulled into a sharp bun, her leather jacket a stark contrast to the cozy interior. Charlotte had tracked her down through an old journalism contact, a name whispered in hushed tones as someone who knew the underbelly of San Francisco's tech world. Lena's eyes, sharp as cut glass, flicked up as Charlotte approached. "You're late," she said, her voice low, with a trace of an accent Charlotte couldn't place. "And you're drawing attention." Charlotte slid into the seat opposite, her pulse quickening. She said, "I need to know about Project Eclipse," keeping her voice steady. "And Elise." Lena's lips curved, not quite a smile, more a predator sizing up its prey. She leaned back, her fingers drumming lightly on the table. "You're in deep, aren't you? Most people would have run by now." She paused, her gaze piercing. Project Eclipse was Martin Technologies' crown jewel, a system designed to monitor and neutralize cyber threats in real time. Think of it as a digital immune system for the world's infrastructure banks, power grids, governments. But it's a double-edged sword. In the wrong hands, it could manipulate data, crash markets, and even start wars. Charles shut it down when he realized its potential for abuse. Or so he claims. Charlotte's throat tightened, and Elise Lena's eyes narrowed, her voice dropping to a whisper. Elise Kane was his shadow. Brilliant, ruthless, and obsessed with power. She helped design Eclipse, but saw it as a weapon, not a shield. When Charles cut her out, she didn't just disappear, she went underground. She's been building her own network, a syndicate of tech moguls and mercenaries who want Eclipse for themselves. Charlotte's mind raced, piecing together the fragments. The note, the murder, the woman in the video, it all pointed to Elise. "Why does she look like me?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Lena leaned forward, her gaze unflinching. "That's the question. Some say she altered her appearance to get under Charles's skin, to haunt him. Others think it's a coincidence, a cruel twist of fate. But I don't believe in coincidences, do you?" Before Charlotte could answer, Lena slid a folded paper across the table. "A list of names," she said. "Investors tied to Eclipse. If you want answers, start with them. But be careful, Charlotte. These people don't play nice." Charlotte unfolded the paper, her eyes scanning the names. Tech CEOs, a senator, a hedge fund manager. One stood out. Gabriel Ruiz, a former engineer at Martin Technologies. Her stomach twisted. She'd heard Charles mention him once in passing with a bitterness that hadn't made sense at the time. She tucked the paper into her pocket, her fingers brushing the USB drive she'd kept hidden since last night. Lena grabbed her wrist as she stood to leave, her grip surprisingly firm. "One more thing," she said, her voice cold. "There's someone else pulling the strings, someone even Elise answers to. If you dig too deep, you'll wish you hadn't." She released Charlotte's wrist and leaned back, her expression unreadable. "Good luck, Mrs. Martin. You're going to need it." Charlotte stepped back into the alley, her breath visible in the cold air. The cafe's warmth felt like a distant memory as she hurried toward her car, the list of names burning a hole in her pocket. She didn't notice the black SUV idling at the corner, its tinted windows reflecting the gray sky. As she unlocked her car, her phone buzzed with another text from the unknown number, "Lena's not your friend. Trust no one." Her heart skipped a beat. She spun, scanning the alley, but it was empty except for the fog. The SUV was gone. Or had it ever been there? She slid into her car, her hands trembling as she locked the doors. Lena's warning echoed in her mind. Someone else pulling the strings, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, not just by Elise, but by something larger, something that thrived in the shadows. Back at the penthouse, Charles was waiting, his suit jacket slung over a chair, his tie loosened. As she walked in, his eyes locked onto hers, as if he could sense the questions brewing inside her. "Where were you?" he asked, his voice calm but tense. "Getting coffee," she lied, her voice steady despite the guilt gnawing at her. She slipped the list into her purse, her mind racing. She wanted to trust him, to believe he was the man who'd risked everything to save her, but the secrets he kept were piling up like bricks between them. He stepped closer, his hand brushing her cheek, his touch warm but searching. "You're hiding something," he said softly, his gray eyes piercing. "Please don't shut me out, Charlotte." The irony of his words stung. She pulled away, her voice sharp. "Then don't shut me out either. Tell me about Gabriel Ruiz." His face darkened, a shadow passing over his features. "Where did you hear that name?" he asked, his tone clipped. She held his gaze, refusing to back down from someone who knows more than you tell me. For a moment they stood frozen, the air between them taut as a wire. Then Charles exhaled, his shoulders sagging slightly. "Gabriel was one of my best engineers," he said, his voice low. "He worked on Eclipse with Elise. When I shut it down, he didn't take it well. He left the company, but not before stealing fragments of the code. I thought he was gone for good." Charlotte's heart pounded. "And now?" "Now," Charles said, his voice hardening, "he's a loose end, and loose ends are dangerous." As the city lights flickered beyond the windows, Charlotte felt the weight of the truth pressing down on her. Gabriel, Elise, the mysterious puppet master Lena had hinted at, they were all connected, and she was caught in the middle. The list in her purse felt like a ticking bomb, each name a step closer to answers or disaster. She didn't know who to trust, but one thing was clear. The shadows were closing in, and she couldn't afford to stay in the dark. The penthouse was too quiet, the kind of silence that carried weight, like the calm before a storm. Charlotte sat at the kitchen island, her fingers tracing the edge of a cold coffee mug. The list of names from Lena lay spread out before her, Gabriel Ruiz's name circled in red ink. She'd spent the afternoon cross-referencing it online, piecing together fragments from tech blogs and financial reports. Gabriel had vanished from Martin Technologies 2 years ago, only to resurface as a consultant for a shadowy firm tied to offshore accounts. The others on the list, senators, CEOs, a venture capitalist with a reputation for ruthlessness, formed a web of power and greed, all circling Project Eclipse. Charles had left for a late meeting, his parting words terse. "Stay here, it's safer." But safety felt like a cage, and Charlotte couldn't sit idle. She slipped the USB drive into her laptop again, her heart racing as she dug deeper into the files. Most were locked behind encryption. She couldn't crack, but one folder opened a series of emails between Gabriel and Elise, dated just weeks ago. One line stood out. "The board is restless. If Martin doesn't cooperate, we move to Plan B." The words sent a chill down her spine. She was about to open another file when a sharp thud echoed from the hallway. Her head snapped up, her pulse spiking. The penthouse was supposed to be impenetrable cameras, alarms, a security team on call. She grabbed a kitchen knife, its blade glinting under the dim lights, and crept toward the sound. The hallway was dark, the city's glow filtering through the windows in slivers. Another thud, softer this time, came from Charles's study. She pushed the door open, her breath shallow. The room was empty, but a drawer in Charles's desk hung open papers spilling onto the floor. She stepped closer, her eyes scanning the mess. A photo lay among the documents, a younger Charles, his arm around Elise, their smiles bright but strained. The resemblance to Charlotte was uncanny, down to the curve of her jaw. Her stomach twisted. Was this why Charles had chosen her? Was she just a replacement for a ghost? Before she could process it, a shadow moved behind her. She spun the knife raised, but a hand caught her wrist, twisting it gently but firmly until the blade clattered to the floor. A man stood before her, his dark eyes gleaming with amusement. He was lean, his suit tailored but slightly rumpled, his hair streaked with gray. "Careful, Mrs. Martin," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "You might hurt someone." "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. "Gabriel Ruiz," he said, releasing her wrist and stepping back. "I believe you've been looking for me." Her blood ran cold. She backed toward the desk, her hand brushing the edge, searching for anything she could use as a weapon. "What do you want?" she asked, her eyes never leaving his. Gabriel smiled, a predator's grin. "To talk. About Eclipse. About Charles. About the woman who thinks she can outsmart us all." "Us." Charlotte's voice was sharp. "Who's pulling your strings, Gabriel?" His smile widened, but his eyes were cold. "You're asking the right questions, but looking in the wrong places. Elise is back, Charlotte, and she's not happy about the life you've stolen from her." Charlotte's heart pounded. "I didn't steal anything. She left him." "Did she?" Gabriel tilted his head, his voice dripping with mockery. "Or did Charles push her out, just like he pushed me out? He's good at cutting people off when they get too close to his precious empire." Before she could respond, the front door slammed open. Charles's voice cut through the silence, sharp and commanding. "Charlotte." He appeared in the doorway, his gun drawn, his gray eyes blazing. Gabriel didn't flinch, his hands raised in mock surrender. "Easy, Martin," Gabriel said, his voice calm. "I was having a chat with your wife." Charles stepped forward, his gun steady. "Get out, now." Gabriel laughed, a low, chilling sound. "You can't hide forever, Charles. Elise is coming for you, and she's not alone." He backed toward the window, his movements deliberate. Before Charlotte could blink, he smashed the glass with a hidden device and leapt out, vanishing into the night. The alarms blared, but he was gone. Charles lowered his gun, his chest heaving. He crossed to Charlotte, his hands cupping her face, his eyes searching for injuries. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice rough with worry. She nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. He said, "Elise is back," she said, her voice trembling, "and that she's not alone." Charles's face hardened, his hands dropping to his sides. "I should have ended this years ago," he muttered, more to himself than to her. He turned, striding to the desk, his fingers sifting through the scattered papers. He froze when he saw the photo of him and Elise, his jaw clenching. "Charles, Charlotte," said, her voice soft but firm. "No more secrets. Who is she to you, and why does Gabriel think I stole her life?" He turned to her, his eyes stormy but raw. "Elise was never what you are to me," he said, his voice low. "She wanted power control. I could trust her, but she betrayed me and tried to sell Eclipse to the highest bidder. I cut her out, but not before she took a piece of me with her. I didn't tell you, because I thought I could protect you from her." Charlotte's chest ached, torn between love and doubt. And now she asked, "What's plan B?" Charles's gaze darkened. "I don't know. But whatever it is, it's already in motion." As the alarms continued to wail, Charlotte felt the weight of the night pressing down on her. Gabriel's words echoed in her mind. "Elise is coming for you," and the photo of her doppelganger burned in her memory. The penthouse, once a sanctuary, now felt like a battlefield. And somewhere in the city, a woman with her face was plotting to tear it apart. The museum's marble halls gleamed under cascades of golden light, chandeliers dripping like molten stars above the crowd. Charlotte adjusted the strap of her emerald gown, its silk catching every flicker as she moved through the charity auction. The air was thick with the scent of wealth orchids, aged wine, and the subtle musk of power. Beside her, Charles was a study in control, his black tuxedo, sharp as a blade, his gray eyes scanning the room with quiet intensity. They hadn't spoken about Gabriel's intrusion since the night before, but the weight of it hung between them, a silent fracture in their carefully rebuilt world. The auctioneer's voice rang out smooth and commanding as bidders raised paddles for artworks worth fortunes. Charlotte's fingers tightened around her clutch, where the list of names from Lena Voss lay hidden. Gabriel Ruiz's name and the other influential figures tied to Project Eclipse are still burned in her mind. She'd spent the morning digging deeper, cross-referencing financial records and cryptic tech forums. The pieces were starting to fit. Eclipse wasn't just a failed experiment. It was a digital Pandora's box capable of rewriting the rules of global finance. And someone, maybe everyone on that list, wanted it. Charles's hand brushed her lower back, a gesture meant to steady her, but it only sharpened her nerves. "You're tense," he murmured, his voice low enough to blend with the hum of the crowd. "What's wrong?" She forced a smile, her eyes flicking to the auctioneer as a painting, a swirling abstract in blues and golds, sold for $12 million. "Just tired," she lied, her voice smooth. She couldn't tell him about the list, not yet. Not until she understood who Lena was and why her warning about a puppet master felt like a blade pressed to her throat. The crowd parted and Charlotte's breath caught. Lena Voss stood across the room, her auburn hair swept into an elegant updo, her silver gown shimmering like liquid metal. She wasn't the scrappy journalist from the cafe. She was posing as a collector, her smile polished as she chatted with a tech mogul. Charlotte's pulse quickened. Lena hadn't mentioned attending or even hinted at being part of this world. Was she here for answers or something else? Before Charlotte could move, Lena's eyes met hers, sharp and unyielding. She excused herself from the mogul and glided toward Charles, her movements deliberate. "Mr. Martin," she said, her voice warm but edged. "I was hoping we'd cross paths." She extended a hand, her gaze flicking to Charlotte for a fraction of a second, a challenge hidden in her smile. Charles shook her hand, his expression neutral but his grip firm. "Ms. Voss," he said, his tone cool, "I didn't expect to see you here." Lena's smile widened, but it didn't reach her eyes. She said, "I go where the art is gesturing to the auction, though I suspect we're both here for more than paintings." Charlotte's stomach twisted. She stepped forward, her voice low but firm. "What are you playing at, Lena?" Lena's gaze softened, almost pitying, and just trying to keep up, Mrs. Martin. "You're in deeper than you know." Before Charlotte could press further, Lena excused herself, vanishing into the crowd as the auctioneer announced the following item, a sculpture embedded with a faint glowing pattern. Charlotte's eyes narrowed. The pattern wasn't random. It was a QR code, subtle but unmistakable to her designer's eye. She leaned toward Charles, her voice barely a whisper. "That sculpture, it's hiding something." He followed her gaze, his jaw tightening. "Stay here," he said, but she grabbed his arm, her grip fierce. "Not a chance," she said, her eyes blazing. "We're in this together." They bid on the sculpture, their paddle rising in a calculated dance until it was theirs for a staggering sum. As the crowd applauded, Charlotte's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Scan it. Now." Her heart pounded. She pulled Charles to a quiet corner where he used his phone to scan the QR code embedded in the sculpture's base. A website loaded, password protected, but one file was accessible, a blueprint for Project Eclipse. It detailed an AI capable of infiltrating global banking systems, rerouting funds in milliseconds, undetectable and unstoppable. The implications were chilling. Entire economies could collapse with a single command. Charlotte's breath hitched. "This is what they're after," she said, her voice trembling. "This is why Grayson was killed." Charles's face was grim, his eyes scanning the file. He said, "We need to get this to my team." But before he could finish, a low rumble shook the room. Screams erupted as a small explosion tore through the parking lot, outside glass shattering and smoke billowing. The crowd surged toward the exits, panic spreading like wildfire. Charlotte grabbed Charles's hand, her heart racing. Through the chaos, she caught sight of Lena near the museum's entrance, her silver gown glinting as she slipped outside. Their eyes met for a split second, and Lena's lips curved into a smile, cold, deliberate, triumphant. Then she was gone, swallowed by the smoke. Charles pulled Charlotte toward a side exit, his grip unyielding. "We're not safe here," he said, his voice sharp. As they stumbled into the cool night air, fire alarms blaring behind them, he turned to her, his eyes fierce. "They know we have it. Whoever's behind this, they're watching." Charlotte's mind spun, the blueprint's implications colliding with Lena's betrayal and the explosion's chaos. The list in her clutch felt heavier now, each name a potential enemy. As they climbed into the Bentley, the city's lights blurred past, and she couldn't shake the image of Lena's smile. It wasn't just a warning, it was a promise. The game was escalating, and Charlotte was no longer just a player. She was a target. The neon glow of the Tenderloin district pulsed through the rain-slicked streets, casting jagged reflections on the pavement. Charlotte's boots splashed through puddles as she followed the cryptic message she'd received an hour ago, midnight, the Black Orchid. "Come alone." The bar was a dive, its sign flickering, its windows grimy with years of neglect. She'd told Charles she was meeting a client, a lie that tasted bitter but necessary. His protectiveness was suffocating, and after Lena's betrayal at the auction, Charlotte needed answers he wasn't giving. Inside, the air was thick with cigarette smoke and the low thrum of jazz. Patrons huddled in shadowed booths, their eyes avoiding hers as she scanned the room. A woman sat at the bar, her back to the door, her black hair spilling over a leather jacket. Charlotte's heart stopped. The resemblance was uncanny, her own face mirrored, but sharper, colder. The woman turned her almond eyes, locking onto Charlotte's, her lips curving into a familiar and foreign smile. "Elise." Charlotte said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. Elise Kane tilted her head, her gaze dissecting Charlotte like a specimen. She said, "You're braver than I expected," her voice low, almost a purr. "Or stupider." She gestured to the empty stool beside her. "Sit. We need to talk." Charlotte hesitated, her hand brushing the pepper spray in her pocket. She sat, keeping her distance, her eyes never leaving Elise's. Up close, the resemblance was eerie. Same cheekbones, same curve of the lips. But Elise's eyes were a storm dark and unyielding, where Charlotte's held warmth. "Why do you look like me?" Charlotte asked, her voice cutting through the bar's hum. Elise laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "A happy accident," she said, sipping her drink. "Or Charles has a type. But that's not why you're here. You want to know about Eclipse." Charlotte's fingers tightened around her glass. "I know it's a weapon, and I know you want it." Elise's smile faded, her eyes narrowing. "It's more than a weapon. It's freedom. Charles built it to play hero, to save the world from itself. But he's too weak to see its true potential. I can rewrite the rules with Eclipse money power, everything. And you..." She leaned closer, her voice dropping. "You're in my way." Charlotte's pulse raced, but she held her ground. "I didn't ask for this. You left him. You lost." Elise's laugh was cold, cutting. "Lost? Oh, Charlotte, you don't know the half of it. I was his equal, his partner until he betrayed me. He locked me out, stole my work, and now he's parading you around like a cheap imitation." She reached into her jacket, pulling out a photograph Charlotte and Charles at their wedding, her ivory gown glowing under the Napa Valley sun. Elise's finger traced Charlotte's face, her nail leaving a faint scratch. "Leave him," she said, her voice low and venomous, "or I'll burn your world to the ground." Charlotte's blood ran cold, but she leaned forward, her voice steady. "You don't scare me, Elise. You wouldn't need threats if you were as powerful as you claim." Elise's eyes flashed, but the bar's lights flickered before she could respond. A man in a dark coat stood at the entrance, his silhouette broad and menacing. Gabriel Ruiz. Charlotte's heart sank as he approached, his smile sharp as a blade. "Nice reunion," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "But we're on a schedule." Elise stood, her movements fluid, predatory. "You should have listened, Charlotte," she said, her eyes glinting. "Now you're part of the game." She nodded to Gabriel, who pulled a small device from his pocket, a remote, its red light blinking ominously. Charlotte's mind raced. She recognized the device from the auction's blueprint, a trigger for Eclipse's core system. "What are you doing?" she demanded, her voice rising. Gabriel smirked, his thumb hovering over the button and testing the waters. "Eclipse is live, Charlotte. One press and we can drain a bank in seconds. Care to see?" Before she could answer, the bar's door slammed open. Charles stormed in, flanked by 2 security guards, his gun drawn, his gray eyes blazing with fury. "Please, step away from her," he barked, his voice cutting through the room's haze. Gabriel laughed, raising the device. "Too late, Martin. The game's already started." Charlotte moved before she could think, lunging at Gabriel. Her pepper spray hit his face and he staggered, cursing. Elise grabbed her arm, her nails digging into Charlotte's skin. But Charles was there, instantly wrenching Elise away. The guards tackled Gabriel, the device clattering to the floor. Charlotte dove for it, her fingers closing around its cold metal, just as Elise's voice rang out sharp and desperate. "You can't stop it, Charles. It's bigger than you." The bar erupted in chaos, patrons fleeing, glasses shattering. Charles pulled Charlotte to her feet, his grip fierce but protective. "We're leaving," he said, his voice low, his eyes scanning the room for more threats. As they stumbled into the rain-soaked street, the device still clutched in Charlotte's hand. She caught Elise's gaze through the bar's window. Her doppelganger's smile was gone, replaced by a look of pure hatred. Charles's hands shook in the Bentley as he drove his knuckles white. "Why didn't you tell me you were meeting her?" he demanded, his voice raw. "Because you wouldn't have let me." Charlotte shot back, her heart still pounding. "And I needed to see her for myself." He glanced at her, his eyes stormy but soft. "You could have been killed." She held up the device, its red light still blinking. "This is what they're after. Eclipse is already active. Charles's face hardened, his voice low. Not fully. But we're running out of time if they have the activation codes. As the rain lashed the windshield, Charlotte's mind spun with Elise's words. You're in my way, and Gabriel's threat. The device in her hand felt like a grenade, its terrifying and seductive power. She didn't know who to trust, not Charles, Lena, or even herself. But one thing was clear, Elise wasn't just a ghost from the past. She was a mirror, reflecting everything Charlotte feared she could become. And the war for Eclipse was only beginning. The rain battered the penthouse windows, a relentless drumbeat that matched the pounding in Charlotte's chest. She sat on the edge of the leather sofa, the blinking device from the Black Orchid bar, resting on the coffee table like a venomous snake. Its red light pulsed steadily, a reminder of the chaos it could unleash. Across the room, Charles paced, his shirt sleeves rolled up, his gray eyes, stormy with a mix of fury and fear. The confrontation with Elise and Gabriel had left them both raw, the air between them thick with unspoken questions. Charlotte's fingers itched to reach for the photograph of Charles and Elise she'd found in his study, its scratched surface still burning in her memory. But she held back, her gaze fixed on the device instead. She said, "We need to destroy it," her voice cutting through the silence. "Whatever Eclipse is, it's too dangerous to exist." Charles stopped pacing, his jaw tightening. "It's not that simple," he said, his voice strained. "That device is only a trigger. The real power is in the activation codes, and I don't have them. Not anymore." Charlotte's eyes narrowed, her heart stuttering. "What do you mean, not anymore?" "You built Eclipse. You must know where they are." He turned to her, his expression unreadable, a fortress of secrets. "I gave them up," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "To protect you. After Victor Cross, I couldn't risk anyone using Eclipse against us. I handed the codes to a trusted contact, someone outside the company. But now..." He trailed off, his gaze flicking to the device, its light casting eerie shadows on his face. "Who?" Charlotte demanded, rising to her feet. "Who has them?" He hesitated, and that hesitation was a blade to her heart. "Lena," he said finally, his voice heavy. "Lena Voss." The name hit her like a punch. Lena, the woman who'd slipped her the list of names, who'd posed as an ally, only to reveal herself as a chameleon at the auction. Charlotte's hands clenched into fists, her nails digging into her palms. "You trusted her?" she asked, her voice sharp with betrayal. "After everything, you gave her the keys to this weapon?" Charles stepped closer, his hands raised as if to calm her, but she backed away, her eyes blazing. "I had no choice," he said, his voice rough. "Lena was the only one I could trust to keep them safe. She's not what you think. She's a double agent working against the syndicate that wants Eclipse. Or she was." Charlotte's voice rose, her anger spilling over. "She was at the auction, Charles." She smiled as the explosion went off. "She's playing us, and you let her." Before he could respond, a sharp crack echoed through the penthouse. The lights flickered, and the security panel on the wall blared, red lights flashing. Charles spun, his hand reaching for the gun tucked in his waistband. "Get down," he barked, pulling Charlotte behind the sofa. Her heart raced as she crouched, the device still on the table, its light now a beacon in the dim room. Footsteps thudded in the hallway, heavy and deliberate. Shadows moved beyond the glass doors, their outlines distorted by the rain. Charles motioned for her to stay low, his gun raised, his body coiled like a spring. The door burst open, and 3 figures in black tactical gear stormed in, their faces masked, their weapons glinting under the flickering lights. "Please give us the trigger," one growled, his voice muffled but commanding. Charles fired the shot, deafening in the enclosed space. One of the intruders dropped, clutching his leg, but the others returned fire bullets, tearing into the sofa and shattering a lamp. Charlotte's breath came in sharp gasps as she crawled toward the device, her fingers brushing its cold metal. She couldn't let them have it, not when she knew what it could do. "Charlotte, no." Charles shouted, but she was already moving, tucking the device into her jacket and sprinting toward the study. A bullet grazed the wall beside her plaster, exploding in a cloud of dust. She locked the study door, locking it, her hands trembling as she shoved a chair under the handle. The intruders pounded on the door, their shouts muffled but relentless. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, the screen lighting up with a text from the unknown number: "Vab them the trigger or he dies." Her blood ran cold. She glanced at the door, the pounding growing louder, and then at the device in her hand. Charles was out there fighting for her, for them. She couldn't lose him. Not now. Not after everything. The window behind her shattered glass raining down as a figure climbed through. Gabriel Ruiz, his face streaked with rain, his eyes gleaming with malice. He said, "You're predictable, Charlotte," and his voice was smooth, despite the chaos. He held a knife, its blade catching the dim light. "Hand it over." She backed away, her heart pounding. "You'll have to kill me first," she said, her voice steady, despite the fear clawing at her chest. Gabriel smirked, stepping closer. "That can be arranged." Before he could strike, the door splintered open, and Charles charged in, tackling Gabriel to the ground. The knife skidded across the floor, and Charlotte dove for it, her fingers closing around the handle. The remaining intruders burst in, but Charles's security team followed, their shouts and gunfire filling the room. In the chaos, Gabriel slipped free, vanishing through the broken window like a shadow. Charles pulled Charlotte to her feet, his hands checking her for injuries, his eyes wild. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice ragged. She shook her head, clutching the device. She said, "We can't keep running." Her voice trembling, but resolute. "Lena has the codes. We need to find her." Charles's face hardened, his hand tightening around hers. "Then we go to her. But we do it together." As the security team secured the penthouse, Charlotte's mind raced. Lena's betrayal, Gabriel's attack, Elise's return. They were all connected, a web of deceit tightening around them. The text from the unknown number burned in her mind, a warning she couldn't ignore. Whoever was behind this wasn't just after Eclipse. They were after her and willing to tear her world apart to get it. The warehouse district was a maze of rusted steel and broken concrete where secrets went to hide. Charlotte's breath fogged in the cold night air as she followed Charles through the shadows. The device still tucked in her jacket, its weight a constant reminder of the danger they were chasing. He'd tracked Lena to this abandoned complex on the city's edge, a lead from one of his security team's intercepts. The message was clear: Lena wanted to meet only with Charles. Charlotte had insisted on coming, her resolve outweighing her fear. She wasn't about to let him face this alone. The warehouse loomed ahead, its windows dark and its graffiti-streaked walls. Charles paused at the entrance, his gun drawn, his eyes scanning the shadows. "Stay behind me," he whispered, his voice low but firm. Charlotte nodded her hand, brushing the knife she'd taken from Gabriel, now hidden in her boot. The air was heavy with the scent of oil and decay, and every creak of the building set her nerves on edge. Inside the warehouse was a cavern of echoes, its ceiling lost in darkness. A single light flickered in the center, casting a pale glow over Lena Voss, who stood alone, her leather jacket traded for a sleek black coat. She turned as they approached, her auburn hair catching the light, her expression unreadable. "You brought company?" she said, her voice cool, her eyes flicking to Charlotte. Not what we agreed on, Charles. He said, "You don't get to set the terms," his gun steady. Where are the codes? Lena's lips curved, a faint smile that didn't reach her eyes, straight to business. I expected more charm. She stepped closer, her hands raised to show she was unarmed. The codes are safe for now, but the syndicate is closing in. They know you have the trigger and are willing to kill for it. Charlotte's heart pounded, her fingers tightening around the device in her pocket. Why should we trust you? She asked, her voice sharp. You were at the auction. You didn't warn us about the explosion. Lena's gaze shifted to her, sharp and assessing. I didn't know about it, she said, her voice steady. I'm playing a dangerous game, Charlotte. The syndicate thinks I'm on their side, but I've been feeding Charles information for years. I'm the reason he knew about Victor Cross. Charles's eyes narrowed, but he didn't lower his gun. Then why the secrecy? Why not come to me directly? Lena laughed, a low, bitter sound. Because you're not the only one watching me. The syndicate has eyes everywhere. If I'd come to you openly, I'd be dead. She reached into her coat, moving slowly, and pulled out a small drive. This has the activation codes, but there's a catch. They're encrypted, and only I know the key. Charlotte's stomach twisted. You're bargaining with us, she said, her voice cold. After everything, you're still playing games. Lena's smile faded, her eyes hardening. I'm trying to save you both. The syndicate isn't just Elise and Gabriel. There's someone bigger, someone who's been pulling the strings since the beginning. If you want to stop them, you need me. Before Charles could respond, a low hum filled the warehouse, followed by the screech of tires outside. Headlights pierced the darkness, illuminating the walls as a black van crashed through the rusted doors. Gabriel Ruiz stepped out, flanked by armed men, his smile sharp as a blade. You're late to the party, Martin, he said, his voice dripping with malice. Hand over the trigger, or this ends badly. Charlotte's heart raced as she stepped closer to Charles, her hand slipping into her boot for the knife. Gabriel's eyes locked onto her, his smile widening. You're a fighter, Charlotte. I like that. Too bad it won't save you. Charles raised his gun, his voice steady. You're outnumbered, Gabriel. Walk away. Gabriel laughed, gesturing to his men. Am I? The click of weapons being cocked echoed through the warehouse, a chilling chorus. But before anyone could fire, Charlotte acted, hurling the knife at Gabriel. It grazed his arm, drawing blood, and he cursed, stumbling back. The distraction was enough. Charles fired, taking down one of the men, while Charlotte dove behind a crate, the device still in her pocket. Gunfire erupted, bullets ricocheting off the walls. Lena moved with surprising speed, pulling a hidden pistol from her coat and firing at Gabriel's men. Get the trigger out of here, she shouted to Charlotte, her voice cutting through the chaos. Charlotte crawled through the shadows, her heart pounding as she reached a side exit. But as she pushed the door open, a hand grabbed her ankle, yanking her back. Gabriel loomed over her, his face twisted with rage. You're not going anywhere, he snarled, raising his gun. Before he could fire, Charles tackled him, the two men crashing into a pile of crates. Charlotte scrambled to her feet, the device slipping from her pocket and skidding across the floor. Lena dove for it, her fingers closing around it just as one of Gabriel's men aimed at her. Charlotte screamed, lunging forward, but Lena rolled away, firing back with deadly precision. The fight ended as quickly as it began. Gabriel's men were down, and he vanished into the shadows, his laughter echoing as he fled. Lena stood, the device in one hand, her pistol in the other, her chest heaving. We need to move, she said, her voice urgent. They'll be back. Charles pulled Charlotte to his side, his eyes searching hers. Are you okay? He asked, his voice raw. She nodded, but her gaze was fixed on Lena, who held the device like a prize. "Give it to me," Charlotte said, her voice steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through her. Lena hesitated, then handed it over, her eyes unreadable. "You're in deeper than you know," she said softly. "The syndicate won't stop. Not until they have Eclipse or you're both dead." As they fled the warehouse, the city's lights flickering in the distance, Charlotte clutched the device, its weight heavier than ever. Lena's words echoed in her mind, a warning and a challenge. The syndicate was closing in, and the puppet master was still pulling the strings. Charlotte didn't know who to trust, but she knew one thing: she and Charles ran out of time, and the shadows grew darker. The air in the underground facility was thick with the stench of rust and chemicals, a cold, sterile prison hidden beneath the city's pulsing heart. Charlotte's wrists burned against the ropes binding her to a metal chair, the knots biting into her skin. The room was dimly lit, its concrete walls lined with monitors, displaying streams of code, their green digits flickering like a heartbeat. The device from the Black Orchid bar sat on a table nearby, its red light pulsing steadily, a silent threat. Elise Kane stood before her, her black hair framing a face that was both Charlotte's mirror and her opposite, sharp, cold, and utterly without mercy. "You're persistent, I'll give you that," Elise said, her voice smooth as silk, but edged with venom. She paced slowly, her heels clicking on the concrete, her eyes never leaving Charlotte's. "But persistence won't save you. Not here." Charlotte's heart pounded, but she kept her voice steady, her designer's eye scanning the room for any advantage. She said, "You went to a lot of trouble to look like me," her tone sharp. "Why? To haunt Charles, or to steal my life?" Elise laughed, a low, chilling sound that echoed off the walls. "You think this is about Charles?" She stopped pacing, leaning close, her breath cold against Charlotte's cheek. "He's a means to an end. Eclipse is the prize, and you're the key. You've been in his bed, in his world. You know where he hides his secrets." Charlotte's stomach twisted, but she held Elise's gaze. "You're wrong. I don't have the codes. And even if I did, I'd die before giving them to you." Elise's smile was razor thin. "Oh, you will, but not before I take everything from you." She straightened, gesturing to the monitors. "I've spent years perfecting this, a new identity, a new face, your face. With Eclipse, I'll be Charlotte Martin, and you'll be a ghost. Charles won't even notice the difference." The words hit like a blade, but Charlotte's mind raced, piecing together the fragments. Elise's obsession wasn't just about power. It was personal, a twisted desire to erase Charlotte and claim her life. She glanced at the device, its blinking light a countdown to disaster. If Elise activated Eclipse, the world's financial systems would collapse, and she'd vanish into Charlotte's identity untouchable. "You're insane," Charlotte said, her voice low but fierce. "Charles would know. He'd see through you in a heartbeat." Elise's eyes flashed, her composure cracking. "You think you're special?" She spat, stepping closer. "You're nothing but a shadow." He picked up at a wedding. I was his equal, his partner, until he threw me away. Now I'll take it all back. Charlotte's fingers worked at the ropes behind her, her nails scraping against the coarse fibers. She'd noticed a loose knot, a minor flaw in Elise's otherwise meticulous plan. "You're not taking anything," she said, her voice steady. "You're just a copy, Elise, a cheap imitation." Elise's hand lashed out her nails, raking across Charlotte's cheek. The sting was sharp, but Charlotte didn't flinch, her eyes locked on Elise's. The pain fueled her, sharpening her focus. She twisted her wrists, the rope loosening slightly, her heart racing as she felt the knot give. Before Elise could strike again, a low rumble shook the facility dust, falling from the ceiling. Alarms blared their shrill wail cutting through the air. Elise spun her eyes, narrowing, as she grabbed the device, her fingers hovering over the activation button. "They're here," she muttered, her voice tense. "Your precious Charles thinks he can save you." The door exploded inward, metal screeching as Charles stormed in, flanked by his security team. His gray eyes burned with fury, his gun raised, his suit torn and streaked with blood. "Elise," he barked, his voice a low growl. "Please, step away from her." Elise laughed, her hand tightening around the device. "You're too late, Charles. One press and Eclipse goes live. You'll lose everything, your empire, wife, and precious legacy." Charles's eyes flicked to Charlotte, a silent promise passing between them. She nodded, her fingers working faster at the ropes, the knot finally giving way. She kept her hands still, waiting for the right moment. The security team fanned out their weapons, trained on Elise, but she didn't flinch, her smile cold and defiant. "You can't stop it," Elise said, her voice rising. "The Syndicate has the codes. They're already in motion. You think you've won, but you're just delaying the inevitable." Charlotte's heart pounded, her mind racing. The Syndicate, the puppet master Lena had warned about it, was bigger than Elise, bigger than Gabriel. But she couldn't think about that now. She focused on Elise's hand, the device's red light reflecting in her eyes. With a sudden jerk, Charlotte freed her wrists, lunging and tackling Elise. The device skidded across the floor, and Charlotte dove for it, her fingers closing around it, just as Elise's nails dug into her arm. "Please give it to me," Elise screamed, her voice raw with desperation. But Charlotte was faster, rolling away and scrambling to her feet. She smashed the device against the concrete, its light flickering as sparks flew. Elise's scream echoed, a sound of pure rage, as she lunged at Charlotte, her hands clawing for her throat. Charles was there, instantly pulling Elise back, his grip unyielding. The security team swarmed, pinning her to the ground as she thrashed, her eyes wild. "You can't stop it," she shouted, her voice breaking. "The Syndicate will come for you. They know everything." Charlotte stumbled to Charles's side, her chest heaving, her cheek stinging from Elise's scratch. He pulled her close, his arms a fortress around her, his breath ragged. "You're okay," he whispered, his voice raw with relief. "You're okay." She nodded, but her eyes were fixed on Elise now, handcuffed and snarling as the security team dragged her away. The monitors flickered, their code streams glitching as alarms continued to blare. Charlotte's heart sank as Elise echoed, "The Syndicate has the codes." The device was destroyed, but the danger wasn't over, not by a long shot. As they left the facility, the cold night air hitting her like a slap, Charlotte clutched Charles's hand, her mind racing. Elise was gone, but the Syndicate was still out there, and they were one step ahead. The war for Eclipse was far from won, and Charlotte knew with chilling certainty that the real battle was beginning. The San Francisco skyline glittered like a promise, its lights piercing the fog as Charlotte and Charles stood on the balcony of their penthouse. The city stretched below, alive and restless, its pulse contrasting with the quiet between them. It had been 3 days since the confrontation with Elise, 3 days since the device was destroyed, but the weight of her final words lingered like a storm cloud. The Syndicate has the codes. Charlotte's hand rested on the railing, her fingers brushing the new ring Charles had given her, a simple band engraved with "Forever No Shadows." But even its warmth couldn't quell the unease in her chest. Charles stood beside her, his arm bandaged from a graze sustained in the warehouse fight, his gray eyes fixed on the horizon. He'd barely slept, spending hours with his tech team, trying to trace the stolen codes. The blueprint from the auction revealed the full scope of Project Eclipse, an AI capable of infiltrating global systems and manipulating data with surgical precision. If activated, it could destabilize economies, erase fortunes, and shift power on a scale unimaginable. And someone out there had the keys to unleash it. Charlotte said, "We need to find Lena," her voice cutting through the silence. "She has the codes, or she knows who does." Charles nodded, his jaw tight. "I've got people tracking her. She's gone dark, but she can't hide forever." His voice was steady, but Charlotte caught the flicker of doubt in his eyes, a crack in his usual armor. She turned to him, her hand resting on his arm. "What aren't you telling me?" she asked, her voice soft but firm. "After everything, no more secrets." He exhaled, his shoulders sagging slightly. "Lena wasn't just a contact," he said, his voice low. "She was part of Eclipse's original team, alongside Elise and Gabriel. I trusted her to safeguard the codes because she understood the stakes. But now, I don't know whose side she's on." Charlotte's heart sank, but she nodded, her resolve hardening. "Then we find ourselves. We end this." They spent the next day in a war room, a hidden office in Martin Technologies' tower surrounded by screens, and a team of hackers Charles had personally vetted. Charlotte pored over the blueprint, her designer's eye catching patterns in the code that others missed, subtle markers hinting at a backdoor, a failsafe Charles hadn't mentioned. She pointed it out, her voice steady. "This could stop Eclipse if we can access it, but we need the codes to activate it." Charles's eyes lit up, a spark of hope breaking through his exhaustion. "You're brilliant," he said, pulling her close for a brief, fierce kiss. "If we can trigger the failsafe, we can shut Eclipse down for good." But their plan hit a snag when a hacker uncovered a trace of Lena's movements, a digital footprint leading to a server in Hong Kong. The data was fragmented, but one message was sent from Lena's alias to an unknown recipient: "Eclipse is live. Martin is the key." Charlotte's blood ran cold. Lena wasn't just hiding, she was orchestrating something, and Charles was her target. Before they could act, the office's alarms blared, red lights flashing. Security footage showed a breach, armed figures moving through the tower's lower levels. Charles grabbed his gun, his voice sharp. "They're here. We need to move." They fled through a service tunnel, Charlotte clutching a laptop with the fail-safe data, her heart pounding as shouts echoed behind them. The tunnel led to a rooftop helipad where a chopper waited, its blades already spinning. As they climbed aboard, gunfire erupted, bullets pinging off the metal. Charles shielded her, his body a barrier, as they lifted off the city, shrinking below. Charlotte opened the laptop in the chopper, her fingers flying over the keys. "If we can hack the server Lena used, we might find the codes," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. Charles nodded, his hand resting on her shoulder, a silent anchor. Hours later, they cracked the server in a safe house overlooking the bay. The codes were buried in layers of encryption, but so was a video message from Lena. Her face appeared on the screen, her auburn hair disheveled, her eyes haunted. Charlotte," she said, her voice urgent. "I didn't betray you. The syndicate forced my hand. They have my sister. If you're seeing this, you have the codes. Use the failsafe, but hurry. They're coming for you." The video cut off, leaving Charlotte and Charles staring at the screen. "She's telling the truth," Charlotte said, her voice soft but certain. "We have to trust her." Charles nodded, his expression grim. "Then we end this. Tonight." They worked through the night, uploading the failsafe to Eclipse's core system. As dawn broke, the AI shut down, its threat neutralized. But Lena's warning lingered. The syndicate was still out there, and Lena was gone, her fate unknown. As they stepped onto the safe house balcony, The city waking below Charlotte's phone buzzed with a final text from the unknown number. Well played. But the game isn't over. Attached was an image, a crescent moon eclipsing a sun, the syndicate's symbol. Charlotte's heart sank, but she turned to Charles, her hand finding his. Whatever comes, she said, her voice firm, we face it together. He pulled her close, his lips brushing her forehead. Always, he whispered, his voice a vow. They returned to Napa Valley that evening, the vineyards glowing under the setting sun. In a quiet ceremony, they reaffirmed their love, and the ring on Charlotte's finger symbolized their unbreakable bond. But as they danced under the stars, a black car idled in the distance, its driver hidden behind tinted glass, a crescent moon emblem glinting on the dashboard. The syndicate was watching, waiting. And Charlotte knew with a certainty that both thrilled and terrified her that their story was far from over.